I think a good starting question is to think, about curating this and to think to yourself, what should students' entitlement be? What do we want students, especially those students, to have experienced? And how likely are they to have experienced them in some other form elsewhere? How will these texts that we're thinking about introduce them to things which they might be otherwise unfamiliar? Will we get a representation of lots of different voices or ideas? Will they be age appropriate? Will they explore topics that might be problematic, that might be difficult? And how will you go about that? If there are problem areas, sensitive areas in books, do we need to balance things like fiction and non-fiction? And are we selecting things just for enjoyment or to benefit? Do they represent serious reading? Now, here is, for Ormiston Academy's Trust, this is our proposed read aloud curriculum that's still in a process of negotiation. And what we're doing as a trust, what I'm leading on, is resourcing all of the titles on this slide with training packs and teacher resources, so that, for instance, if you're reading I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou in year 11, that the teachers will be briefed, by the way, when you get to chapter 11, Maya talks about being sexually abused by an adult. So you really need to know that that's coming. We don't want anyone being surprised by that. And here are some suggestions for the sorts of things that you might want to say in advance, or allow students to think about. And also, by the way, in a couple of times in the book, she uses the N word. So we would advise you perhaps not to read that aloud and to talk about, why that choice has been made, both by Maya Angelou to use the word and you not to read it aloud, and how our views on things like that have shifted over time and all that sort of stuff. So that's the sort of thing. And then, and then a training program for each individual text on how to go about some of the vocabulary, how to go about some of the context that students might need in order to make sense of it, how to pronounce names, perhaps, depending on the text. That might be an issue. So that's the idea. And hopefully, looking at those titles and those questions on the previous slide, I will make these slides available to you, by the way, if you want them. You can see that they meet those criteria to some extent or another. Now, arguably, there are better texts that you might want to pick. And certainly, I'm not suggesting at all that these are the only options available, but hopefully the processes by which we might have arrived at this list are fairly transparent. And so I've been working on, and it's still in draft form, but I'm happy to send anyone this who would like it. I've been working on a toolkit to help schools get this right. And so I'll send it to Lisa, who can decide what to do with it. But it takes you through various ideas like resourcing the programme, both in terms of buying books, storing books. Where do you put them in plastic crates? Do you have dust jackets? How do you get those at cost? But also in terms of how do you fit it into the school day? We've recommended to our schools that this is a tutor time programme. Some of our schools have actually gone as far as reorganising elements of the school day. So a number of schools have put an extra 20-minute tutor time at the end of the school day in order to facilitate the reading aloud programme. But also, I think 20 minutes at the end of the day is such a brilliant way of dealing with all sorts of other issues as well. It's 20-minute tutor time at the end of the day, honestly, even if you don't do this, well worth investigating. It also looks at the training, both training as why we think this is important, training on how to do it, training on individual texts, training on those teachers that don't feel confident or able to read aloud to students, how will they be supported, all of that stuff. And then the real clarity about how to go about leading the programme, who needs to be involved, who's the point of contact for different year groups, how do SLT support effectively, and then how is it monitored? How do you make sure that it's happening the way you want it to happen, and how do you evaluate whether it's been successful? So all of those, I won't go into it all now, but they're all in the toolkit, or they're addressed in the toolkit. And if you do have a look at it, I'd really welcome any feedback that you could give me about things that you think still need to be added, because as I say, work in progress. So this is where I suggest pausing. So I'm I'm just going to just give you the key points here, and then we'll have a short break before going on to the other stuff. So reading fluency, it's a hidden problem that will be affecting a significant minority of your students. The reading interventions that you're currently doing are unlikely to be neutral, that many of them end up widening the gap inadvertently, and that's worth really seriously and carefully thinking about. And reading aloud, I'm offering to you as having really important potential benefits that particularly meet the needs of our most disadvantaged students, and therefore is likely to be more gap narrowing than gap widening.